when African American kids are 500 times more likely to die from asthma than white kids, and when the children of majority black Flint, Michigan have been drinking and bathing in lead-poisoned water for more than a year, making sure all Americans have clean air and water isn't just a health issue, it's a civil rights issue. We would be outraged if this happened to white kids, and we should be outraged that it's happening right now to black kids.
Hillary Clinton today in Columbia, South Carolina, saying the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King on his birthday lives on in the national outrage over the lead poisoning of the kids of Flint, Michigan. Joining us now from Iowa is the former Secretary of State, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Madam Secretary, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's good to talk to you again.
I know you are casting Flint, Michigan as a civil rights issue, which makes it a federal issue by extension. This weekend, President Obama approved $5 million in some limited aid for FEMA. He did deny Michigan's request for more help to rebuild Flint's infrastructure. I wanted to know your reaction to that decision by the president.
Well, first of all, I think it's really important for the federal government to get in. It's been unconscionable, as you pointed out, for the residents of an American city to be living with water so dangerous that, GM won't even use it because it was corroding their car parts. And I think it's important that the federal government really push the government of Michigan, particularly Governor Snyder, to ask to set up a comprehensive health monitoring for kids who've been exposed. I know that the Obama administration is standing ready to assist, but the governor needs to make the ask, and he needs to make it now for the sake of those children. The state of Michigan also needs to do its part in dealing with the long-term health and infrastructure issues. They created this disaster in the first place through their negligence and incompetence. And the governor and his administration apparently knew or had reason to know that the water was contaminated and chose not to take action. So this is an environmental justice issue, a health issue, and every way that we can imagine a crisis of the first order. So we've got to keep pressing the state to ask for what the federal government can provide, and as I said on your show, we need to keep hoping and pushing the federal government to see what it can do to actually intervene and do more for the people.
When you brought up the Flint crisis at the debate last night, you went out of your way to do so. You weren't asked about it directly, but you brought it up. Senator Sanders then talked about it too. Senator Sanders says that he wants Governor Snyder to resign over this issue. The governor of Michigan responded to you two on Twitter. He said, political statements and finger pointing from political candidates only distract from solving the Flint water crisis. Do you have any response to that?
Well, I do, because thanks to what we have done, and you've been a big part of this, the national spotlight is shining on the horrible situation in Flint. And it's clear that as intention has increased, so has the governor's apparent willingness to deal seriously with the issue. I don't call that politicizing. I'd call that getting results. And I think we should take advantage of the fact that the country is coming together behind the people of Flint. But I think we've got to make sure we do everything we're supposed to do to help the children and families that have been drinking and bathing in this poisonous lead-contaminated water, while their representatives and state government did nothing. That's why I keep reiterating the governor needs to request comprehensive health monitoring of kids who may have been exposed to lead. I think the state should set up what I think should be called a future fund to take care of children who've been poisoned. And looking at where the state of Michigan is, the governor is actually sitting on a budget surplus and a rainy day fund. And as far as I'm concerned, if there were ever a rainy day in Flint, it's right now, and the money should be forthcoming.
Last night's debate, Madam Secretary, was the last Democratic debate until mid-February. I'm struck by the fact that even though the Republicans just had a debate and they're about to have another debate before Iowa, there isn't another Democratic debate before Iowa or before the primary in New Hampshire. Do you wish there were more debates? Are you enjoying these debates when they do happen?
I love the debates. I really do. I feel that it gives me a chance to get up on the stage and explain my positions, answer questions from the moderators, draw contrasts with my opponents. So it's been a good experience for me so far, and I think it's helped me make my case for my candidacy.
The sparse Democratic Party debate schedule this year, particularly when compared to the Republicans, a lot of people in the political press have ascribed that to your campaign, have ascribed that decision to your campaign, essentially wanting a low-profile and spare debate schedule. Whether or not now, looking back, you think it was a good decision, is it true that your campaign advocated for a light schedule, and particularly these debates being on in TV Siberia on weekends and holidays?
Well, Rachel, I really don't have any knowledge of that. I'm not saying that nobody representing me or the other campaigns didn't express an opinion, but it was my understanding that in looking at the sequencing of these debates, looking at the numbers of people who watched back in 2008, there was a decision to try to have a monthly debate once people were beginning to pay attention and try to drive more viewership. And actually, I believe that we've had more viewers on average this year than we did back in 2008. So I'm not going to, substitute my judgment for whatever the thought process was. And as to when they've been scheduled, again, what I'm told is that they were partnered with broadcast networks that wanted to provide the time, and indeed for most broadcast networks, Saturday or Sunday was preferable. But because the viewership has been above average, I think people feel like there is a method to their process.
Well, if you and Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley ever decide that you want more and you don't want to negotiate it, you can all just show up here and I'll help.
Well, we did have that great forum that you moderated
in South Carolina. That's right.
That got a lot of good response. So we sure have enough attention to this campaign. So I hope whatever the format is for getting us before the voters, it will encourage even more people to come out and caucus and come out and vote in the primaries.
Let me ask you one last question about the sort of state of the Democratic race. I know that you say that you don't follow poll to poll and you don't necessarily think that every poll tells a compelling story, but there is new polling analysis that's out today from 538.com, and they've got a very good predictive track record. And they say that today that you are more likely than Senator Sanders to win both in Iowa and in New Hampshire, despite his particularly good numbers in New Hampshire right now. If they're right, if you do beat him and you become the nominee, what is your plan to try to get Senator Sanders' supporters to back you? We just showed footage of him tonight in Alabama. He's got this huge crowd. We all know from public information that he's got millions of individual donors. If you win the nomination, how do you win Bernie Sanders supporters over, especially now that you're being so tough with him and his record?
Well, first of all, Rachel, I don't pay attention to the polling when it's good or bad because I think it's distracting. I'm just going to keep working as hard as I can to convince as many people to support me as possible. So I don't want to put any, carts before the horse here. I think it's important to stay focused on what we have to do in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in Nevada, and South Carolina, and then right after South Carolina, we have March 1st, where there's a large number of states that will be holding contests. But if I am so fortunate as to be the Democratic nominee, I'm going to work as hard as I can to reach out to supporters of my opponents, and particularly to, do what I hope would be successful in making the case for their support going into the general election. I remember how hard I had to work back in 2008 to convince a lot of my supporters to support President Obama. And you recall I nominated him at the Democratic Convention in Denver, put my whole self on the line to make the case that whatever differences we might have had in our very long primary, they paled in comparison to the differences we had with the Republicans. And I believe with all my heart it would be a terrible result if by some combination of misfortune or indifference the Republicans were to take back the White House. I can't even imagine everything that would be disrupted and the clock turned back on. So I'm not going to talk about what hasn't happened yet, but if it were to happen, I would work very hard to earn the support of anybody who either supported my opponent or wasn't involved in the primaries, or even people who, under normal circumstances, might have voted for the Republican Party, but if they nominate someone who is likely to be a very contentious presence in our country, making sure that everybody understands what's at stake. And I hope I could be successful in doing that.
When that last prospect that you raised, are you talking specifically about the Republican frontrunner, or is there a number of candidates you're thinking of there?
Well, I think a number of them, in fact, all of them have said things that I find not only factually wrong, but divisive and unconnected to the real problems we face in the country. I just am coming from an event we had in a small town here in Iowa, and I said, I don't know who the Republican candidates talk to. They sure aren't talking to the people I'm talking to, who are, struggling with 3 jobs, or trying to afford college, or burdened by student debt, or unable to pay for their prescription drug costs, and so many more of the very personal problems people share with me. I don't know who these people talk to on the other side of the aisle, because I think maybe they just have a cast of actors that they move from site to site, because they're sure not hearing the stories and the concerns about what the next president's going to have to try to deal with. And so I think all of them would be a very bad choice for our country.
Former Secretary of State, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. I really appreciate you taking the time to call in tonight from Iowa. Thank you so much, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.